How long have you been practicing yoga? A year, 5 years, maybe even longer? And in all that time, has the anxiety actually gone away? Have you stopped snapping at all the people you love? Have you let go of that sense of comparison, the scrolling, the checking, the quiet measuring yourself up against everyone else and the things that they seem to have? Or does it still feel like somehow you get on the mat and for 60 minutes in the morning you seem to forget about your worries, but then when you walk into your real life, everything just comes right back and nothing really seems to shift underneath it all? I'm Sushmitha, but you can call me Sushi, and on this channel, I help you quiet those racing thoughts through the power of a time-tested, structured practice called Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga. And if you've been taking your health seriously lately, if you've been doing all of the right things, you've been going to the group classes, you've been eating all the right foods, but there still seems to be this kind of underlying sense of just not quite enoughness, then I know that this video is made and built just for you. I created it just for you because if you've been carrying around this feeling for a while now, this sense that even though you've been doing practice for a long time, you somehow feel like your practice should be doing more for your mind, your anxiety, and the way you feel than it currently is, then I do have a program where we walk through this in depth together, the Yoga Mastery Program. The link is in the description below. But I really need you to know that you're not specifically disadvantaged somehow just because your left hip is not the same as your right hip and it feels like getting into lotus is impossible and therefore being a yogi in this lifetime is just totally out of question. If that's you, don't worry at all. You've just been given this incomplete picture of what yoga actually is, and today I want to give you the whole picture, the rest of the picture. So let's dive right in. Now here's the most important thing that I want you to understand about what real yoga actually is. Now in the West, when we say yoga, we usually mean the postures, we mean the shapes, the asana, which is the third limb out of the 8-limbed path, which is one limb out of 8 limbs. And Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is a foundational text of classical yoga, describes the Ashtanga yoga path as comprised of all of these 8 limbs. Ashta means 8. Anga means limb. I'm sure you've heard of this somewhere before, but the postures are one piece of a much larger architecture. And the first 2 limbs that come before the postures, the ones that are meant to kind of serve as the foundation upon which everything else is built, those are the ones that are almost so important and no one really talks about them in a Western yoga studio class. And these are the yamas and the niyamas. Now the yamas are essentially 5 ethical guidelines that we use to learn how to relate to the world around us, the surrounding world. And the niyamas are 5 principles for how we should relate to ourselves. And so together the yamas and niyamas are the ethical and psychological ground upon which the entire physical asana practice is supposed to stand. Now imagine building an entire physical practice like a skyscraper without actually laying the proper foundations. It can look impressive, you can look fancy on the outside, but there's nothing solid at the foundation. And so the higher you go and the more you start to build, the more unstable and shaky it starts to become. This is why some of the most physically advanced practitioners I know and you know are some of the most ego-driven people that you and I know, because the skyscraper was built upwards without actually focusing on sideways expansion first. Let me explain why this matters, not just philosophically, but also neurologically. Your physical practice works primarily through the body. It regulates the nervous system, it reduces this chemical called cortisol, and it builds what neuroscience calls interoception, which is the ability to feel what's happening inside of you. And these are real, measurable effects, and they're genuinely powerful, they're genuinely useful. But here's what the physical practice cannot do. The physical practice of asana cannot change your thought patterns directly. They cannot rewire the stories you tell about yourself, about who you are and what you deserve. It cannot stop that comparison reflex. It cannot change the self-critical voice. It cannot stop that chronic ambition for always wanting to get more, because those patterns do not live in the muscles or in the fascia alone. They live in what Patanjali calls the chitta. Now, chitta is not just the body, it's not just the mind, it's a field of consciousness that permeates through the mind and the body. And they are held in place by something much older and much more stubborn than our tight hamstrings. And the Yoga Sutras describe these 5 patterns that cause suffering. These are the kleshas, or the afflictions. Now, at the root of all of these 5 is avidya, which is like the root cause of all our suffering. And it's a specific kind of ignorance or non-seeing, and it's the ability to not be able to distinguish between the self that is permanent and the self that is conditioned that we go through life with. Now, this might seem a bit too philosophical, so don't worry about it, just put a pin on it and we'll come back to it later. But in plain and simple language, you have been living as this anxious, always comparing, never enough version of yourself for so long because you've not been able to clearly see, or you've mistaken that version of yourself for who you actually are, which is this untainted, beautiful, untouched consciousness. And the yamas and niyamas, the thing that we talked about, are these practices or disciplines that can begin to change this from the inside out. Let me give you the full map quickly, just so that you can see the shape of it, and then you can explore that later. Essentially, the 5 yamas are ahimsa, which is non-violence, satya, which is truthfulness, asteya, non-stealing, brahmacharya, the wise use of your energy, and aparigraha, which is non-possessiveness. Now, there are also 5 niyamas that I talked about, which is saucha, which just means cleanliness, inside and out, santosha, contentment, an inner sense of contentment, tapas, disciplined effort or austerity, Ishvara Pranidhana, and Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya is a sense of self-study of scripture, and Ishvara Pranidhana, the final one, is surrendering to something that's larger than your little ego self. Now, so I listed out 10 principles really quickly, and I could spend a whole hour, many hours on each of these, but I'm not going to do that today because I just want to deep dive into 2 of them. And I'm zoning in on these 2 because I believe that these 2 are the ones that are directly responsible for the specific kind of anxiety and restlessness that most of us, people like you and me, are carrying around every single day. And these 2 are actually the most invisible ones that create the most damage. And if we're missing these 2 from the practice, then our practice somehow seems to be stalled or stunted in some way. And they are Asteya and Santosha. So let's start with Asteya. Asteya translates to non-stealing. Now, your first instinct when you hear this would be like, I'm not a thief. I don't take things that are not mine. And in the obvious sense, you probably aren't a thief and you probably don't take things that aren't yours. But picture this. You're having a perfectly ordinary morning. You just practiced, you made your coffee, you sat down for a few minutes of just quiet in your balcony. And then you just picked up your phone and you see that someone that you know that just launched something new, or a colleague in the office that just achieved the thing that you've been working so hard to get. Or someone in your field who's doing exactly the thing that you said you were going to do, the project that you were going to start. And they seem to be doing it with so much ease, so much visibility, so much momentum, so much lightness. And you're just like, what? In a span of like 30 seconds after you've done your practice and you feel that sense of calm, suddenly all the effort that you made in the morning, gone, just like that. And the quiet is gone, and something has almost been taken away from you, has been stolen from you. And Asteya is this reverse, right? It's kind of like it goes far deeper than just not taking someone else's things, objects. In the yoga tradition, Asteya also means not stealing from yourself, not robbing your future self by always living in this kind of anxious future projection, not taking from the piece that's genuinely available to you right now, right here, and always feeding the mind that insists that there isn't enough available for you right now. And the Sanskrit word stay means coveting, and it's not just taking, but it's wanting what someone else has in a way that generates a sense of suffering inside of you. And the Bhagavad Gita identifies this as one of the 6 enemies of the mind. And it's not a moral failing, it's almost like just a habit of consciousness that you've fallen into and you just couldn't quite catch. It's a pattern that's so deeply worn into the mind now that you've just stopped noticing it, and it's just like, that's the way you are. And social media has made this way more complex than it needs to be. we're now exposed every single day to more versions of what our life could look like, what our life should look like, more points of comparison than any human nervous system was designed to process in the whole entire of history. And so the comparing mind, the part of us that's constantly doing that kind of analysis, was not built for this level of input. And so on your mat, Asteya looks like focusing solely on your practice, not someone else's practice, not glancing at the person who's been practicing for 12 years and then silently just, adjusting your effort based on what they're doing, trying to compare yourself, trying to do more, not pushing deeper into a posture because you wanted to look a certain way from the outside, not comparing this morning's practice to last Tuesday's practice, to last year's practice, or what you could do in your 20s, because you don't need to be any other practitioner than the practitioner you are right now. There is no other place that you need to be with your practice. And in Ashtanga specifically, this is one of the things that I love the most about this practice, is that the sequence remains the same for everyone. You do your practice in a Mysore room at your own pace, but amidst the other people, but you move at your own pace. And there's no performance. The sequence is not some kind of competition to reach the end. It's a mirror. That's all it is. It's a mirror. And when you practice this quality of Asteya, you stop looking into someone else's mirror and trying to understand your own reflection. You look at your practice every single day as the mirror, and whatever the mirror is reflecting back to you, you can work with that. The second principle I want to go deep with today is Santosha or contentment. This is my favorite one because it's so not touched upon in all of these other discussions on Yamas and Niyamas, and I think it runs so deep, especially because of the way that we approach contentment in the West versus the East. And I want to be very honest with you, because when I first encountered Santosha within my yoga textbook for my teacher training, my immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, that's so lame, because contentment is so passive. It sounded like I was settling for something, and I didn't want to be mediocre. I wanted to be special. And if that's your reaction right now, I completely understand. This is not about settling. This is not about being content with what you have and not striving for more. Patanjali defines Santosha as the absence of this hankering, desperate, craving energy. Not the absence of a wanting to be better, not a numbness or a detachment in this disconnected sense, but the absence of a specific forward-leaning urgency towards that goal, that perpetual hunger that, if I get that, then I'll be happy. And this way, you're always placing your happiness somewhere else, in the next achievement, in the next relationship, in the better version of yourself, at the next milestone. And if you really ask yourself, truly just sit with yourself and ask yourself, how much mental energy is lost and wasted in living in the future in that way? We can't predict the future. We don't have control over the future. And so think about the last time you actually achieved something that you genuinely worked hard for. You maybe spent 2-3 years putting the necessary effort. It took a long time. It was something that really truly mattered to you. And then notice, honestly, how long did that satisfaction actually last? Maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe even a day. And then after that day or two passed and that feeling of, wow, I achieved it, went away, it's almost like immediately you didn't even allow yourself to fully celebrate or fully land that you had finished it. The goalpost had already moved. The next thing appeared on the horizon. And you weren't just working on one thing, you were maybe working on 3 or 5 things simultaneously. And so when that one thing clicked, you were like, but the rest of my life is still messy because all these other things haven't been finished. You can't quite live like this. And it's not like, you're ungrateful or that you have some kind of character flaw that doesn't allow you to enjoy these simple moments of success. It's because the achieving mind, the mind is designed this way. It's a rajasic, striving mind, and it's structurally incapable of staying satisfied with what it has. And so it's almost always designed to seek. And when it keeps seeking and it keeps increasing desires, it's also never quite arriving. It's never quite satisfied. It's never quite landing in this is enough, I've done enough. And in neuroscience, we call this the hedonic treadmill, the adaptation response that you're always striving for more, you're always doing more, because gains in the external conditions produce only little bit or temporary increases in well-being before a new baseline resets. And so your nervous system adapts to this achievement, and what once felt extraordinary just becomes ordinary. And frankly, Patanjali described this exact mechanism 2,500 years before modern neuroscience caught up. But his prescription is not to stop achieving. It's actually to cultivate santosha, or contentment, as an active, deliberate quality of attention, to find within this present moment, right now, the completeness that the striving mind says is only possible in the next one, somewhere in the future, but to almost radically rebel against it and cultivate it right now. And on the mat, santosha is practiced in the postures where you feel the most resistance, in that posture that you just can't seem to break through, where the inner voice says, I should be further along than I am by now, I've been doing this for so long. And that voice, the voice of dissatisfaction, that is where you can actually bring in the sense of santosha. You have to almost cultivate it initially in a forced, almost mechanical way until it starts to feel natural. And every single time you breathe into it, you stay with it, and you choose not to fight against the present moment to be somewhere else, you're practicing contentment in the most concrete, real way possible. And here's what I find extraordinary about the Ashtanga practice is that it's a really specific vehicle for this entire work of yamas and niyamas in motion. The yamas and niyamas are not like something that you have to add to the practice after you finish primary series. They are literally inside of it. They're built into the structure itself, if you can look for it correctly. So the sequence does not change based on your mood or based on your ambition, based on anything else. The sequence is fixed. And the tapas, or the discipline that you need, is always like, you always require tapas, you always require discipline to show up. And the breath arrives when you do it the right way. The breath will move first and then the movement will follow. And every single time, that is contentment in action. You're following the lead of the breath instead of the breath or the posture dictating how you should be breathing. And when you have this soft inward gaze, it's almost like a direct embodiment of pratyahara, which is letting the senses just return home, not always be outwards. And when you add this layer of stillness on top of every single movement, it almost becomes Asteya in motion. This is the moment where you could be like looking around the room and comparing and doing more, but you choose not to. And the entire practice, if you do it with this layer of the philosophical underpinnings that are infusing the practice, the entire practice then becomes a moving meditation on the yamas and the niyamas. And this is not about something that you philosophically understand and then you can't implement. It's teaching you how to embody these principles in a very physical form. And that's the difference between those that do yoga for 60 minutes and those who are practicing yoga as a lifestyle, who really truly live it. And when Asteya and Santosha, these two principles, begin to take root firmly into your body, they do only with consistent practice, something begins to change in the texture of your life. In your daily life, you pick up your phone, you scroll, you see someone else's achievement, but instead of that familiar, I'm just not good enough, that sense of drop in mood, there's a little bit of space that you can pause, you can breathe for a second or two, and then you can see that stuff playing out in real time, and then you can put the phone down consciously and you can return to your work, you can go back to your own life, you can continue to practice without being swept away by that emotion. And even though initially you may come out of the mat still tired, still stiff, still far from, where you want to be, instead of the inner monologue of self-criticism, there's something little bit more arriving there, which usually is, and has been for me, a sense of gentle curiosity. It's this gentle sense of curiosity that arrives that says, this is where I am today, and the breath is here, and this is where I am. And this is not about some dramatic transformation. These moments come very quietly, very subtly, and in my own experience, they are far more durable than any form of external achievement, like doing a handstand or lifting up into Pincha Mayurasana, because these are the changes that actually change the quality of your consciousness, not just depend on changes in circumstances in your life. And this is what you came here for, right? This is why you started your yoga practice. And it's been available to you this whole entire time in the practice that you're already doing. So you just need to look at the full map to know where you're headed so that right now in today's practice, you can begin to move in that direction again. And if this landed for you today, if you've been practicing faithfully and you still feel like something is missing, the Yoga Mastery program is what you need to do. We can work together. It's just a 30-minute 30-minute call where I'm going to try and assess where you are in your practice, and these foundations that I help you set up will make everything else feel stable, feel centered, and you'll begin to incorporate this and notice how it ripples out into the rest of your life. The link is in the description. I've already said that before, but as always, thank you so much for watching till the very end, for having the patience and the attention to listen to me and want to do more than postures. I think that's super important. So thank you so much. Subscribe, share this video, tell a friend, comment down below, do all of the good things, because it tells the algorithm to tell me to keep making more of these videos for you for free. But as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and have a wonderful, wonderful day ahead.